Welcome back to The Sign of the Chrysanthemum by Catherine Patterson. Chapter 16, The Sword of Fukuji. At first, he felt himself a peculiar creature among all the peculiar creatures of the gate. His clothes were better than anyone else's, while at the same time he was barefoot. He caught the beggars staring at him. Their eyes went from his face to his clothes, to his feet, and back to his face. Their expressions never changed. But Muna could feel the questions behind those blank eyes. In the early days, he went out beyond the gate into the mountains when he craved privacy. There was none at the gate, of course. There, by a stream, he would take off his clothes and wash them, and himself. He always returned to the gate. He had sentenced himself to hell, and he did not try to escape. But before the summer was over, the weather had begun to fade his clothes. He had lost the cloth that bound his long hair, and it hung tangled about his shoulders. Gradually, he ceased trying to groom it or to keep his clothes or body clean. And without realizing it, Muna melted into the hodgepodge of his surroundings and became a true creature of the gate, no more to be noticed or remarked upon than one more fly on a pile of manure. The summer chilled into fall. Above the city, the maples lit the mountains like a rash of tiny fires among the pines. The sky was like a brilliant jewel that the sun goddess Amaterasu had washed with sparkling rain and rubbed to shining with the hem of her trailing garment. But there was a dullness in the boy. The filth, the restless nights, the grubbing for food, he'd forgotten to hate them now. Occasionally he would look down at his feet and realize all over again that they were bare, and always seemed to come as a surprise. He should have spent his few coins for sandals, he would tell himself, all over again. The food was gone so quickly. Soon it would be winter, and he would still be barefoot. When winter came, renewed rumblings of revolt came with it. There had been mysterious fires during the fall, and open squabbling between Genii and Heike in the streets. But by the last month of the year, even the creatures of the gate were laying odds as to when open warfare would break out, and which clan would triumph. And even in his dullness, Muna knew that Takanobu would be among the rebels. But across the Kamo River in the great mansion at Rokuhara, Lord Kayamori seemed deaf to rumor and blind to the violence in the streets. He had planned a pilgrimage to Kumano Shrine in honor of his dead father, and he was determined to make the trip before the beginning of the new year. When he was nearly a week's journey from the capital, the Genii struck. They put the emperor under heavy guard and seized all the positions of authority. Genii soldiers were posted all over the city, and preparations were made to capture Rokuhara itself. But news of the coup d'etat reached Lord Kayamori, and he gathered armies from the outlying provinces and marched toward the capital. There were always soldiers at Rashomon, for at the gate the girls were cheaper than the ones on Rokoju Avenue. And there were plenty of pawnbrokers who never asked questions. But now there was an ugly mood in the Genji troops who were set to patrol the gate. They were arrogant in their swift capture of the city, but at the same time, they dreaded the return of Kayamori with his army athirst for revenge. So they badgered the creatures at the gate. They pushed them away from their own bonfires and took goods and girls without payment. They were coarse men to begin with, and their fears of what lay outside the gate made them even louder and more brutish. Muna did not object. He now belonged fully to that class of people who expected to be bullied by the rest of the world, who think that by objecting they will only bring further misery upon themselves. He had no dreams of personal worth left to smash. Then one day he saw the woodcutter. He was talking to one of the Genji warriors. He, he, he. Muna could hear that horrible, pinched laugh, but he could not make out any of the conversation. Suppose the old man had seen him hide the sword. Suppose he was even now contriving to sell the sword of Fukuji to one of these brutish guards. A vision of Fukuji holding the shining blade up to the sun flashed across Muna's mind. That sword at the side of one of these disgusting beasts? He hurried through the gate. His feet, wrapped in rags against the winter, could scarcely make their way up the icy path. He clawed his way up from tree to tree, snatching at roots and dried foliage that often gave way, so that he fell backward and had to scratch his way upward again. Like a frog in a well. But he clung on with teeth and hands and cruelly frostbitten feet, until at last he gained the summit and came to the neglected shrine with the empty food cup. For months now he had forgotten every human feeling except hunger. But now fear loomed up greater than even his ravaged body. He paced off the 25 steps from the idol's head. Was the place disturbed? Yes. No. How could he tell? He tried to dig through the frozen earth with his bare hands, but he soon had to give this up. He found a sharp stick that broke at once with a brittle snap. At last, he found a pointed rock and began hacking away at the ground. Ugh! Ugh! He stopped to listen, but the strange noise he heard was his own breath coming out in sobs. 3 feet into the frozen ground. It seemed an eternity. But at last he saw a glitter. One of the gold-leafed chrysanthemums on the sheaths. The gods, whom he had long forgotten, the gods be praised. He continued digging until the whole length of the sword appeared. He lifted it gently, and taking the hem of his tunic, wiped the dirt from the hilt, the filigreed guard, and the gold-leaf chrysanthemum flowers on the sheath. Then, almost reverently, he withdrew the blade. It was spotless. The engraved characters Fukuji blinked up as if to mock him. Quickly, he resheathed the sword and bound it once more under his trousers. As he passed the shrine, he wished he had something, a rice cake, a piece of fish, but having nothing, he broke off a bit of pine and placed it in the empty offering cup. So it was that night that Muna stood by the communal fire with the sword of Fukuji bound to his side. At first, the soldier simply came up beside Muna as the boy sought to warm himself. But then a second soldier came up from whom there was no place in the circle. "Hey, stiff-leg, make way for your protector." Not knowing who Stiff-leg might be, Muna simply glanced about the circle in the stupid manner of a beggar boy. "I mean you, Stiff-leg." With that, the soldier gave him a tremendous kick that sent Muna tumbling over toward the fire. With a terrible rip, the sword tore its way out of the now ragged garment, and for a few seconds the gold figures on the sheath glinted in the firelight. Muna struggled to his feet, pulling the shreds of his trouser leg together in an attempt to cover the sword, but it was useless. Everyone had seen it. Hee, so that's where you had it hidden. From nowhere, the old woodcutter appeared, jumping up and down with glee. I combed the mountain, I did, and it was in his trousers all the time. Hee. The soldier pushed the old man aside. Let's see it, boy. What do you have there? Muna backed away and then darted through the circle of startled creatures surrounding the bonfire. He ran up the steps of the gate, but the great doors were closed. He turned to find both soldiers just below him. They stood with their swords drawn. Either you are a spy or a thief. Which? Muna stood cornered like some dumb, uncomprehending animal. It doesn't really matter. You will die for either crime. But if you give us the sword, we might... The sword. This cruel lout thought he could wear the sword of Fukuji? Something human. Some ancient memory of cleansing fire and pure water stirred in Muna's brain. Come on now, give it to me, like a good puppy. The boy's hand went down into the fold of his tunic. Slowly, carefully, he drew out the shining blade. That's right. Arrah! Like a tiger, he sprang upon them. They fell back in startled confusion from the deadly path of the blade, and the boy ran, his matted hair streaming behind him like a madman through the streets of the city, the sword high in his hand. He was taking